My name is Abby Kenigsberg. The next line is the gag line, so wait a minute, please. But you can call me Westminster Abbey. I'm glad to see you all at HBH. I like to think of this room as the echo chamber for excellence. Excellent programs have come here. Moments of laughter have come here. I remember when Dr. Charles Nemerov, who recounted right here that he was going to be honored at the National Academy of Medicine. And he said that was a big deal. And as he was preparing, he asked his wife, "In your wildest dreams, could you imagine we would get to this place?" And his wife said, "You're not in my wildest dreams." It was not in my wildest dreams to think I would be introducing an extraordinary writer for his epic novel, The Slip. He holds an MFA from New Writers Project at UT Austin, and the book was the winner of a Kirkus last year for fiction. The Washington Post decided that this book was one of the 10 best of last year, and the New York Times Book Review said it was one of the 100 notable books of last year. I have read The Slip a couple of times. It's raunchy, it's tender, it's funny, and it's bursting with language and imagination. The author is here to tell us how and when this book began. So please welcome Lucas Schaefer.
Thank you so much for having me, and Abby, thank you for having me. It's been really fun getting to know Abby over the last couple months as we've planned this event. So I'm going to just tell you very briefly what the book's about, and then we're going to have a conversation, and then I'm going to read to you a little bit of the book, and then we'll take questions from the audience. If you like what you hear, our friends at First Light Books are here, and you're welcome to pick up a copy on the way out. I'm happy to sign them as well. So, The Slip takes place in Austin. So it's been really fun talking about the book in Austin with people in Austin. And it is about a very hapless 16-year-old boy named Nathaniel Rothstein who gets into a fight. He's from Massachusetts. He gets into a fight at school, and he's sent sort of as punishment. His mother sends him to Austin for the summer of 1998 to live with his Uncle Bob. And his Uncle Bob is a UT history professor. He's a pretty loose guy, kind of a hippie-ish guy, and he doesn't really know what to do with this 16-year-old boy who's dumpy, he's unhappy with his body, he's 16. No one's having too much fun at 16. And so he sets him up with his friend David, and David works at a retirement community. He's the activities director. And he's an immigrant from Haiti. He's lived in Texas for about 30 years. And he takes Nathaniel under his wing. And David is a former boxer. So he starts taking Nathaniel to a boxing gym in Austin. And over the course of this magical summer, Nathaniel starts to feel more confident about himself. He starts to feel more poised. He starts to get stronger. And then at the very end of the summer, he disappears and is never seen or heard from again. And the book follows a huge cast of characters over about 20 years as we find out what happened to Nathaniel, and as we find out what happened to these characters at this gym where he spent a lot of time, And it's also, I don't mention this when I'm not in Austin, but when I am in Austin, it's also a book about Austin and how Austin has changed since 1998.
Okay. How about telling us why it's 500 pages and why it's in 2 sections? I was reading the first part, but I wasn't prepared for the fact that it's changed. Please tell us what's that.
Yes. So when I sold this book, it was 150,000 words, which is very unusual for a novel. Most novels are maybe 90,000 words. And my agent told me, you know, you're gonna have to cut this down because no one needs 150,000 of your words. They might like some of your words, but that's a lot of words. And in the end, this book is 160,000 words. Because I really wanted to write a book that encompassed all of Austin. So I moved here in 2006 when I was 24, and I didn't know anyone. And I started going to a boxing gym on North Lamar Boulevard called Lord's Gym. It's still there. Some of you may have seen it or been inside. And what I loved about Lord's Gym was it felt like everyone was at this gym. There were professional boxers, there were amateur boxers, there were people like me who had no idea what I was doing. It was every race, every religion, every profession, every age. You know, there were people who'd been in Austin for 75, even 80 years. There were immigrants to Austin who'd arrived yesterday. And so it was a great introduction to the city. And I really, with this book, wanted to capture that broad slice of life. So we really go into a number of the characters' histories, sort of across a lot of different identities. And that's part of why it's so long. And it's also a mystery. And during COVID, my husband and I got a subscription to the Criterion channel, which has like lots of art house movies and experimental movies, and really enjoyed experiencing some of these more like off-kilter movies. And this is when I was writing the book, but a lot of them will have like a mystery, but then the mystery's never solved, and like the last image is like fog. And you're like, huh. And I really wanted to write a mystery that had an ending. Like most mysteries, you know, we can't solve every mystery, but many mysteries actually do have an answer. And so a grad school professor I had named Steve Harrigan, you may have read some of his novels, a very known Austin novelist, great professor. He always used to tell his students and would tell me and my classmates, think about what would really happen next. Like if you're stuck, what would happen next? And so that's what I did with this book, with each character. I just thought about what would happen next, and what would happen next, and what would happen next, and that sort of led to the end of the mystery. But that's why it's a big book. And it is also a book that changes midway through, you know, what you think you're reading, it ends up a little bit different. And that's just because that's the sort of books I like to read. I like to be surprised. I kind of wanted to write a jigsaw puzzle where you get all of these different pieces, and hopefully Abby can attest to this. In the end, it does form a cohesive puzzle, but it takes a while to get there.
Favorite character? Tell us. You've got so many characters.
Okay, so the book is a little bit raunchy, and I did promise I would keep it PG, which I absolutely will, but I will say there's one character named David, who is the raunchiest of the characters, and he is my favorite. But not because of, that's not why. That's not why. The reason he's my favorite, so David is this immigrant from Haiti who's come to Austin in 1970 and has lived here for 28 years when the book starts. And he's the activities director of this Shoal Creek Rehabilitation Center, which is a retirement community. And he's someone who's doing fine. Like, he's happy with his life, he's married, he travels, he makes some money, but, you know, he was gonna be a boxer and it didn't work out. And so he just feels a little unsatisfied. And this book took 12 years to write. And when I started the book, I was 30. Very confident. And I understood this David character on a sort of psychological level. I could understand what he was going through. But you know, I took a long time to write this book, and as I'm writing the book, I have friends who are writers, who are publishing books, winning awards, doing, you know, really doing it, and I'm writing. And so I started, and there was some point about 7 or 8 years in where I was looking at this David character who I understood on a psychological level, but suddenly I really understood on an emotional level. I was like, oh, I can see what it would be like for this dream to not happen, right? And I kind of had to write the book for that long to get to that point, to really then know that character. And he's kind of the heart of the novel. A lot of what happens for good and for bad is kind of because of him and through him. And so that was sort of a neat experience, because, you know, when you're in it, it doesn't seem that fun to be in year 8, you know, thinking, how do I make money and have a life at this as I'm doing this? But he's probably my favorite.
I find that very interesting that you knew the character on one level, but not on another level. Can you explain that a little more?
Yeah, I mean, so the characters in this book none of them are very similar to me on paper, right? So I'm obviously not, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but I'm not from Haiti, I'm not an immigrant. There are characters who are dealing with sort of gender issues and exploring their gender. So there are a lot of there are just characters who are very far afield from who I am. And so to start the book, it was just thinking psychologically about what would it be like to be this person in this situation. But over time, as you get to know them, because I think of these people, after 12 years, I think of these people as my friends, which, if that makes me sound nuts, guilty. But you start to understand, when I was writing a character, there'd come a point where I would have the character do something, and I'd hear the character in my head be like, I'm not doing that. That's not, you're wrong about that. And that's when I would know, okay, I got this one.
That's very interesting. Yeah, that they become more alive to you and more real to you as you keep going. In other words, at first it's kind of a profile,
Yeah.
and then it's not a profile. It's an actual person.
Yeah, they develop,
Yeah.
you know, flesh.
Yeah, and that takes a long time, always? Or was ever anybody, it was quick? Or does it take?
No, not for me. I'm working on my second book now, and my you know, sort of agent is like, it's going to be so much easier, and I'm like, no, I don't think so.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I read somewhere that what a writer really needs is tenacity and empathy. What do you think about that?
I agree with that. I mean, to do anything for 12 years and not be sure if it's going to work out does definitely take some tenacity. So my husband is also a writer, and he took about 10 years to write his book. It came out a couple years ago. And we got to a point about 7 years in where like we put a lot of eggs in this basket, and this was, we now have a son, but this was before we had kids, so we weren't that crazy. But you know, we got to this point where it was like, oh, if this doesn't work out, we're in trouble. But writing is a little bit like the stock market. You can't pull out when it's low. That's not the, you gotta ride the wave a little bit. So I do think it takes tenacity. And was empathy the other one?
I'm sorry?
Empathy was the other tenacity.
Yeah, tenacity and empathy.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is what's great about fiction, right? I mean, we live in a world right now where it feels kind of hard to, I think, relate to other people sometimes, and to connect with other people, especially with technology. And I mean, there's a lot keeping us apart. So I think sitting down every day and trying to think about what is going on in these other people's heads, I find that really satisfying as a way to spend my time. And hopefully when you're reading the book, you're also entering the heads of people who you might not have anything in common with, but maybe you actually do.
Which brings me right into the last question I have before you do some
Yes,
reading for
sure.
us. Suppose I'm in a class and I've been told I've got to write a short piece on someone who lies all the time. And I come to you and I say, Lucas, give me a way in, give me a way out.
Well, I'd say write it in the first person, in the I, and then just lie. Right? Also, it's fiction. I mean, the thing about fiction is we are liars. Like, we are kind of liars, like as fiction writers, as novelists. I mean, we're making stuff up, and one of the quirks of this book is I work with a lot of writers doing sort of consulting with writers on their projects. And a concern they always have is, I want to base this on real things, but I need to change all the names. And I was just, this is set in Austin, and so I was like, the Magnolia Cafe will be the Sunflower Cafe, or whatever. And as I was writing it, it didn't work. It's like, no, it's Magnolia Cafe. So I ended up keeping all of the locations are just real. There's Amy's Ice Cream, there's Garden Springs, it's all real. But that really let me be a better liar with the other things, because there's sort of like a gloss of realness. Like, oh, Garden Springs is real, Amy's Ice Cream is real, but all of the people, of course, are made up. So.
Okay, I want to hear you read from your book. I think this is time, right?
Yeah, this is perfect.
This is good?
This is perfect.
Okay, great, thank you.
I'm going to read 3 short passages and just tell you a little bit about them as we go. The first one I'm not going to say anything about because it's the very opening of the book. And so well, I'll say this. So the book takes place between 1998 and 2014. And when it opens, it's 2010. No, I'm sorry, it's 2008. So this boy, Nathaniel, who's been missing, has been missing for 10 years. And it opens on the anniversary of his disappearance, 10 years later in 2008. The morning after Ed Hooley saw a coyote in the supply closet, Bob Alexander declared something smelled rotten inside Terry Tucker's boxing gym. This was at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday, midway through abs and stretching. Inside the ring, the 11 members of the First Thing crew sprawled out on foam mats as Terry Tucker, 54, led them through an arduous medley of scissor kicks and side to sides, knees to your ears, and upside down bicycle. It was August in Austin. The average age inside the ring was 49. And though it would be hours before a single speck of perspiration would appear on Terry's left temple, his charges were sopping. Sopping except for Bob Alexander. Bob was lanky and spry, a semi-affable curmudgeon. At 68, he was the oldest of the first thingers, and among the fittest, too, though on this morning he was only going through the motions. Preoccupying Bob was the anonymous note that had been placed under the windshield wiper of his Audi sometime the night before. It had been a decade since his nephew had disappeared, and things like this still happened on occasion. A lead to nowhere, a tip to nothing, a psychic in New Braunfels who'd experienced a vision. Sounds promising, Bob had told the detective who'd called with that gem. A few days before, a short article on the 10th anniversary of the disappearance had run in the Statesman. So of course the kooks and grifters were coming out of the woodwork now. No one had ever shown up at his house before, though, and it was this, combined with the note's puzzling content, which meant that as soon as Bob left the gym, he would take the folded paper, stowed in his glove compartment, to Austin Police Headquarters, a time suck in building form, where, if he had to guess, he'd rehash the story of his missing nephew, Nathaniel Rothstein, without coming any closer to finding him. Bob had never figured out how to talk about it all. It was strange to lose a nephew. Lose a son, well, that's awful, a tragedy. But a nephew? Who even liked their nephew? Nephews were always conspiring against patriarchs, trying to kill the king. And why shouldn't they? Uncles were worse. Bob liked to joke it was amazing he was never a suspect, given the reputation of that breed. You want to end pedophilia? Bob had told the Statesman reporter, ban uncles. That is off the record and he's kidding, Bob's wife Marlene had been quick to add. He's a professor, she'd said, by way of explanation. That's why he's so voluble. I'm more voluble than a professor, said Bob, recently retired, Professor Emeritus. Even with his friends here at the gym, Bob rarely brought it up. Most of them had known Nathaniel too. The kid had spent hours hitting the heavy bag that weird summer of 1998. But there were parts of the story the first thingers didn't know, parts Bob didn't want them to know. Besides, with them it was easy to ignore the subject. People disappeared from this place all the time. It was the nature of the business, the nature of a gym. So that's sort of the opening. And, you know, over the course of the book, we meet a lot of these gym characters, and that's sort of the central location of the book. And one of the themes of this book is transformation. A lot of the characters undergo big transformations over the course of their time at the gym. And as a writer, I'm very interested in this notion of transforming and changing. And I thought boxing was just the perfect sport to use to explore this subject, because I don't know if any of you have gone to a boxing gym, but if you ever hit a heavy bag at a boxing gym, you really feel, I really feel like I can kill someone. And I cannot kill anyone. At least not with my hands. So it's sort of a transformative sport. So that's sort of why boxing was the sort of name of the game here. So I'm going to go back in time now to 1998 and introduce you to poor Nathaniel, our 16-year-old, who disappears. And this is right after he's come to Austin and he's had his first day at this retirement community. And he's now back in the guest room where he's staying, and he's very unhappy. He'd arrived in Austin 4 days ago, and he still couldn't get over the unfairness of it all. Not only did he have to spend his entire break in some random city, but he had to volunteer? All for taking a swing at a kid who'd been asking for it? Nathaniel had planned to spend these months in the cool wings of the Newton South High School auditorium, working stage crew for the summer Shakespeare crowd. Instead, he'd been sentenced to a cooling off period, as his mother had put it, in a place 10 times hotter than Massachusetts. His Aunt Marlene and Uncle Bob's house, 2,000 miles southwest. "Why is it my fault some gay kid came on to me?" he'd muttered to his mom as they crept along the Mass Pike toward the airport the day of his departure. It hadn't felt right coming up, and after he'd said it, he felt even more miserable than before. "That's just great," said his mother, Linda Rothstein, honking her horn as much at Nathaniel as she was at the traffic. "My son, who loves the theater and beating up homosexuals, I'm sure you'll have a very successful career." The crazy part, in hindsight, was that old Rothstein never had it so bad. Sure, it would be another year before his man boobs flattened, before those freckled chipmunk cheeks started to dissolve. Yes, he was easily embarrassed, so prone to blushing he was more red than white, as classically Caucasian as the Kool-Aid man. Maybe he hadn't yet found his people, for even among the stagehands he loitered on the margins, never loose enough to hang easily with those proud outcasts who'd quote Rocky Horror and the Scottish play ad nauseum, who knew their way around wood shops and fly lofts and boy oh boy each other, and had embraced their outsiderness with such verve that in the process they'd turned the outside in. Indeed, the boy's real problem wasn't who he'd become, but the fear that he'd done becoming. For somehow it hadn't occurred to him that the Nathaniel Rothstein of 1998, as ill-defined on the outside as he was on the in, wasn't the Nathaniel Rothstein of forever. That this blob of wet clay was years from the sculptor and the kiln. It was his nebulous nature that had drawn him to theater in the first place. He thrilled at the decisiveness of it, the magic of watching one person become another, fully formed. The Newton South Stars musical that spring had been Man of La Mancha, a play within a play. Nathaniel had gone a little misty on opening night when floppy-haired Ben Schumann, in the lead, bent his back and administered his old man makeup center stage, transforming from Cervantes into Don Quixote right before their eyes. He was careful not to let anyone notice. So bottled was the boy that back at the start of rehearsals, he'd found himself unable even to purchase the soundtrack, mortified at how the coal-eyed salesgirl at Newberry Comics would react if he submitted so fey an offering. He'd slipped the CD into the pouch of his hoodie and bought an Oasis album instead, reasoning that if he purchased something, no one would suspect him of shoplifting. The maneuver worked so well that Nathaniel repeated it multiple times that spring, keeping the unwanted CDs naked in his desk drawer, hiding the musicals under the manlier guises of Radiohead and The Prodigy. Now the naked baby of Nirvana's Nevermind served as a literal cover for Little Shop of Horrors, while Nathaniel's 40 ounces to Freedom jewel case couldn't shut all the way, since around its plastic hub he'd forced the original cast recording of Rent, discs 1 and 2. But La Mancha was his favorite, and back in Newton he'd taken to pacing his room to the soundtrack, Discman tucked in the elastic waistband of his mesh shorts, door locked, too self-conscious to mouth the words, fearful of even a single note escaping him. All this would have been news to Linda Rothstein. Whenever his mother fished for details, Nathaniel's stock response was that the technical aspects were what led him to techiedom. "I don't know, Mom, the light board's just cool." In truth, he'd never touched the light board, set foot in the light booth. By the time of La Mancha, he'd ascended only to assistant prop master, a position usually held by freshmen. This suited Nathaniel fine. The pleasure was in the watching and the imagining born of that. how badly he wanted to be somebody else. So that's poor Nathaniel, who undergoes a little bit of a transformation over the course of our time. We've got a few more minutes, so I'm gonna read, I wanted to read you guys, I mentioned that part of the fun of this project was writing characters who were very different than I was. And one of the characters who's central to the plot is a woman who's living in this retirement community, who is in her 70s when we meet her. And one of the things I learned working on this book was because I was writing characters who were different from me and they're in the past, right? At 1998, I have terrible news. I was horrified to learn this, but there's a website called Goodreads. I don't know if anyone's familiar with this, where people can review books that they've read. And Goodreads calls your book, if it's fantasy, it says fantasy. And my book, set in 1998, historical fiction. But one of the fun things about writing historical fiction is I really spent time thinking about where these different characters were from and what was going on for them in their lives throughout, the time period. So that sort of helped me get into the mind of Gloria, who's a character who befriends David, the activities director at this nursing home. So I'm just gonna read a little bit of our introduction to Gloria, and then we'll take some questions. For the first 74 years, Gloria Abruzzi, daughter of Annunziata and Giampaolo, both of Pescara, daughter of Bensonhurst in the borough of Brooklyn, had been, it was widely agreed, a reluctant Italian. It wasn't that she tried to pass herself off as anything else. Gloria was olive-skinned and ample-bosomed, and in her prime sported a blast of salt and pepper hair that her eldest once likened to Madeline Kahn's 2 feet of frizz in Young Frankenstein. And though she'd married Marvin Robertson in 1950, and though at the Pruitt Psychiatric Center in Queens, where she served as chief psychologist from 1971 to 1980, she was known as Dr. Robertson, she was more than happy to unleash a little Abruzzian spalvadoria when the situation required. "I ain't talking to no tired Ginzo whore," an agitated resident roared at her one morning, in an incident emblematic of her tenure at Pruitt. "Well, you're in luck, Mr. Matthews," said Gloria, "'cause I ain't tired." No, she wasn't a closet Italian, the Gloria Abruzzi of 1922 to 96, but she never held that part of herself close either. Not like her older sister Sophia, who raised her own family in the same narrow 18th Avenue row house they'd grown up in. Not like her younger brother Anthony, who always said he'd die happy if he could spend 3 weeks in the old country baking on the beach in Castle Bordino, and upon his retirement after 15 years as FDNY battalion chief for the 42nd, Bay Ridge to Bensonhurst, promptly did. No, Gloria didn't hold it close, couldn't hold it close, really, not if she wanted to be somebody. And oh, did she, our Gloria, who even as a little girl was cursed with the knowledge that there was more to this life than the 100 yards between the pork store and Giantelli's soda and snack, that the little Italy of Brooklyn was indeed little, and this world was big, big, big. Had she been a looker like her sister, Gloria might have aspired to the homemaking life that was expected of her. But from the start she knew she was plain, broad in the shoulders and heavy on bottom, nearsighted as soon as she was sighted, a pair of thick round spectacles, her binoculars to the world. Plain and peculiar, for Gloria hadn't gotten the memo that ungainly girls ought to at least be quiet. "I'm gonna be a doctor like Sigmund S. Freud," she announced to her family over dinner one Sunday soon after her 11th birthday, having just completed a school report on the man. Never one to take the easy way out. "It's 1933 and being an Italian in America isn't enough struggle for this one," carped her father in bed that evening. "No, our little Gloria needs to be an Austrian Jew." But the idea stuck. Dr. Gloria Abruzzi. For unlike her boy-obsessed sister, unlike the mawkish girls in her class, Gloria could see that the love story they all dreamed of starring in ended not with a kiss in the bedroom, as they imagined, but with a smack on the ass in the kitchen. Yes, girl was looking to get out from the get-go, and get she did. In 1936, at 14, she applied and was accepted on full scholarship into the all-girls Danforth School on East 86th Street in Manhattan. She had to memorize her exact number of trolley stops without the aid of street signs. According to her mother, Gloria had enough going against her without wearing her glasses, of all things, outside the house. An early lesson for this astigmatic ragazza. She wasn't the only one who had trouble seeing. Gloria should have been passable at piano, had previously shown an aptitude for math, but no one considered that the problem might be her eyes. Indeed, the word in the faculty lounge was that the admissions committee, whose members had long talked of funding a scholarship for the underserved, had chosen the wrong guinea pig to start. Maybe she'd do better at her local school? It was optics that nearly felled the girl, and optics that saved her. Gloria had no interest in her local school, and chucking the Italian was not the look to which the good liberals of Danforth aspired. This then was how Gloria Abruzzi learned to be seen, by working her culo off. And if she refused to interrupt her studies for Sunday dinner, resulting in screaming matches between father and daughter that could be heard all the way down the avenue, and if her mother worried she'd end up a spinster, and Sophia called her hoity-toity, and little Anthony said it would be nice if she gave a you-know-what about her own flesh and blood, so be it. By the time, in 1949, she was applying for internships to complete her doctorate in psychology from Teachers College, Columbia University, Gloria Abruzzi, now sporting powder blue leading lady browline frames, was plumb out of you-know-whats to give. So that's just a little of Gloria.
Thank you so very, very much. I tell you, if you want to know the meaning of engrossing, here it is. I want to thank you again and tell you the next time you finish, even if it's 12 years, we'll leave the light on for you. And I want to say thank you for reminding us the luminous power of a good book.
So I think we have some time for questions, if anyone has questions about the book or the process or...
So how did, is it on?
Yeah.
I can be heard anywhere.
Yeah.
So how did living in Austin inspire you to write the book?
Well, Austin, I love Austin. I moved here when I was 24 for a very Austin reason, which was no reason. I just appeared one day, here I am. And, you know, in 2006, which, you know, I've been here for 20 years, and I certainly would never say I'm an Austinite. Don't want to get myself in trouble, but, you know, in 2006, I was hearing the same things that I was hearing in 2016 and in 2026, you know, Austin's changing, Austin's not what it used to be. No one making these comments ever implicates themselves in the change, right? You know, it's just amorphously changed. Other people are coming in. But of course it really does. It does change. I mean, there's a, going back to your thing about a liar, I have this line in the book, and I think it's true, but it was such a good fact that I never really looked it up to see. But the fact is that up until recently, every 25 years since the Civil War, the population of Austin has doubled. It's roughly true. You know, the gist is true. And I just think that's, you know, when you read a story, what's a story about? A person starts in one place and ends in another place, and the story is how they got there. And so as a setting, Austin's great because, you know, even 1998 to 2014, there's just so much difference and so much change. And of course, David, the character in the book, moves here in 1970, so he has a whole different experience of Austin, and Uncle Bob is here even earlier. So it was just a really fun place to explore. I spent a lot of time at the Austin History Center, which the Austin History Center, if there are any writers in the audience who don't know this, in addition to having photographs from all of Austin's history and newspaper clippings, they have, I believe, every single yearbook in Austin, ever. So, if you are someone who writes but has trouble coming up with names, Austin High, 1970, what do we got? They'll never know. Mix and match, it's great.
So you said you were inspired by people that you met here in Austin, but obviously you don't want to offend anybody, and you don't want to be. Did you have to think about what you fictionalized and what you didn't, or disguise who it was? Did you ever have anybody complain about you wrote about me and I didn't like it?
Yeah, so I haven't had any complaints yet. The book's been out a year, no complaints yet.
Everybody hear the question.
So the question was, have I ever gotten complaints, or has there ever been awkwardness over basing things on real people? So the places in the book are mostly real, and they're sort of presented neutrally, right? Like I don't think anyone from Amy's Ice Cream would be upset that they're having a cone of Mexican vanilla at Amy's Ice Cream. But here's the great thing about taking 12 years to write a book. Even if you start with a character who's there's really only one character in this book who's truly, I was like, this person is so peculiar, I just need to steal their entire personality. But even with him, and this is a boxer from the gym, if you take 12 years to write a book, you're making so many changes over the years that the people become their own characters. They become unrecognizable. The problem I have had, I've had a number of friends from the gym read the book, people in other parts of my life, and I've had numerous people claim they are in this book who are not in the book. I see what you did there. No, it's not you. I love you, but it's not you. So I haven't had that particular complaint. And the other thing is, the book really veers very far from my personal experience. I, as a writer, just really like books that go to unexpected places. And as a reader, I like that. And so there's not a lot. There's only one incident in the entire, this book is 500 pages long. There's one thing that really happened to me in real life, which I'll just tell you is this same character from the gym, who was he was like one of these guys he was a former boxer, and he just knew, he could see someone new, and just knew just what to say. He'd say, we actually ended up on very nice terms. I quite like him, but he'd watch me going around the heavy bag, and he'd say, "You're wasting your money." And one day, I was in the Central Market parking lot, and this is the only incident that is real that happened in the book, because it was like too weird to not use. And I'm walking, I've got my canvas bag or whatever, and just a hand goes around my mouth, and I'm pulled back, And a guy says, "Give me all your money." And I turn, and it's him. It's just like, you're such a sucker. Like, that is a bold prank, but I think after that we really developed a good rapport.
Other questions?
So these numerous characters that you generate are a creation, and a creation in your mind, and so it's like they are part of you, but they're also external to you. And I'm just curious to know how that experience is to create a fictional character that's not something you can see, touch, or feel in real life, but yet in your mind they're very real. What's that like?
Yeah, so the question is how, when you're creating a character who's external to you, what does that feel like, and what is that experience like? I recommend it for everyone. It's kind of a magical thing. The question with a character is always, how do you find your way in to the character? Like, what do I have in common with this person who has nothing like me, or who seems to be nothing like me? Because you have to have something to kind of get in with them. And I was born in 1982. And when I was growing up, a lot of the gay characters on TV were like the comic relief. They were the side characters. And I was always like so confused because I was like, I know I'm gay, but I'm definitely the leading character. Like, I'm not, this supporting stuff, this is for someone else. So a lot of the characters in the book experience this feeling, and that's how I found my way into them. They've been marginalized in some way, and the people in their lives, or an institution that they're interacting with, or their family, is treating them as a side character. And no one wants to be treated as a side character. So a lot of the moments of tension in the book come when these characters say, I'm going to be the protagonist in my own life, which is really amazing to them and can also be really scary to the people around them. And so that was kind of my avenue in for a lot of these characters, and then I would just sort of explore. I'm also a very dialogue-heavy writer, so really thinking how would each of these characters sound and figuring out their voice. But I think it's a really special experience to be able to even attempt to do that, which is why, I sounded like I was kidding, but I do recommend it, especially in our current world. I think it's a really valuable exercise.
Another question?
Just on the lighter side, how do you motivate yourself daily to keep that enthusiasm going and your creativeness?
That is a great question. How do you keep the enthusiasm over the course of a long period? I think for me, part of it is I do find it fun to sit and write, but I think fear is really the answer. Because you get to a certain point and this is what you're doing. So this book took 12 years to write, and I came in real hot the first year. I told everyone I'm writing a boxing book. I do not recommend this strategy, because for 12 years I heard, how's the boxing book going? How's the boxing book going? And I would always lie and say, wonderfully. But, 6, 7, 8 years of that, the options are finish or how's the boxing book going? And I couldn't do, that was not gonna work. So, it was just, I was too deep in. I had to just finish and keep going. But it is a job. And that, I guess that's the other thing. I really did treat it like it was my job. I had other jobs of the, money making variety. But treating it like it's your, this is what you're being paid to do, even if you're not.
Other questions?
Here.
Where?
Did you create a character that had never experienced being marginalized? And if
So in the book? Well, I mean, I think
Sam,
Oh, sorry. Did I create any characters who did not experience being marginalized? I think everyone has experienced being marginalized in some way, so no. I certainly created characters who on paper would seem to have advantages in society, I guess you could say. But no, I mean, I think one of the things that was interesting about writing about so many different types of people is you start to realize that the things that we think make us different are actually what make us the same. And that everyone has had some experience of, I'm not being respected. And what does that feel like? And a lot of the points of connection in the book come when people have that moment of, oh, this person is experiencing something that I've experienced. And sometimes that leads to really poignant moments, and other times it leads to disaster. But yeah.
Other questions? Yes, we have one over here. I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you and your husband talk to each other much about what you're writing or key off each other?
Oh yes, we read everything that we read each other's stuff, front to back, but we also don't, I share with basically no one else, because we know each other's work really, really well, until it's at a point of going to an editor or something like that. But yeah, this is a group project in our office.
When did you start writing? Did you start writing as a child?
When did I start writing?
Not this book.
Not this book, yeah. I always wanted to be a writer, and this is also a very Austin thing, is that I always wanted to be a writer and then ended up in Austin not writing. I'll tell you what really happened is I always had this, urge to do this, and I wasn't doing it. I was in my 20s doing other things. And then I met Greg, who would become my husband, and he at the time was getting an MFA in fiction at the Michener Center at UT. So basically doing exactly what I wanted to be doing. And we dated for a year, and it was like getting pretty serious, and I was like, if I stay with this guy who's doing this thing I want to be doing, and I'm not doing it, it's gonna be bad, right? So I still remember our great conversation when I said, guess what, I'm applying to MFA programs, and he ran from the room screaming, but he got over it eventually. And again, fear, envy, jealousy, these are motivating factors, for me at least, but probably for everyone.
We have time for one or two more questions. Somebody have something they'd like to ask? Lucas? Yes.
I'll venture a question.
I know somebody else?
Oh, all right.
Okay. The Michener Center, I've heard of. The program that you're in, I have not.
Yeah.
Is it a part of the Michener Center, or is it a separate deal because? why?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, no, the New Writers Project is an MFA program within the English department, and they're similar programs. They give us less money. It's basically the big difference, and you have less. When I was in it, it was a 2-year program, but it's a fantastic program. I mean, I started the book there. I definitely wouldn't have the book without it. And it's, yeah, UT is an odd, they have a couple MFA programs and they have some different aspects to them, and I don't actually know the history of what that is.
Oh, yes. Did you have a schedule during the 12 years, and did it change over time, or did you pretty well stick with it?
Yeah, so the question is if I had a writing schedule over the 12 years. So this book, the final pass of this book was turned in 2 days before our son was born. And that is when the schedule changed. But for the time I was working on the book, I was very consistent. I would write in the morning, and then in the afternoon and evening, I would do whatever work I was doing to make money, which often involved tutoring and sort of education adjacent things. I had a period as a 7th grade teacher that changed the schedule a little bit and the makeup of my brain, but it was pretty consistent. I'm a morning writer. I find that by about noon, I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but thank you. Yeah. Well, thank you all so much, and thank you, Abby, for organizing this. And wonderful questions from you and